Hey folks, gonna do something a little different today. Well, I say different. I've done this once before, which is to react to one of my own older videos. Now, last time I did this as a live. I'm not doing that this time. I don't have the spoons to run a live event around this concept, but there are some of my older videos, specifically in regards to Doctor Who, that I thought would be fun to revisit, see how much I agree with, and my general feelings. Last time I did this, I tackled a video that very much I'm like, I'm going to be embarrassed at what I said. And that was very much the case. There's the link so you can take a look at the last time I did this. This time, I'm not sure how much this will end up being the case. There were a couple of things that I considered the one I'm opting to go with, and I might do others in the future. We'll see. I'm going to be taking a look at my old video, 4 Things Doctor Who Should Never Do. And one of the reasons why I want to take a look at this is I'm pretty sure at least one, if not a couple of the things have actually happened. So aside from whether or not I agree with my old self, and it is very much my old self, flat cap, old setup, bad quality camera, the works. Besides just seeing whether or not I agree, I can now assess on the issues that have happened and whether or not that actually had the problems that I said it would. So this is going to be weird for me, seeing this face again, but here we go.
I don't like to be overly dictatorial towards shows that I like, but yeah, no, these would all be bad ideas.
That's a weak open. Oh, wow. So this was in the time period where I did actually have an opening thing. This was made for me by a fan whose username is currently escaping me. But he just gifted me this. It might have even been put into a template. I don't know, but like it was good and I liked it. And now I've got the actual custom stuff that gets credited at the end of the things.
So as of the time of my recording this, my most viewed video is, and has been for a while, 5 things that Doctor Who needs to stop doing.
And that was true for a very long time. I finally had a video exceed it last year, and it was the James Somerton video, which, like, I appreciate how successful that thing was, but I don't love that it was like, I don't feel like I made a drama video. However, the video was boosted by the fact that there was a lot of drama going on, and I feel weird about that. But yeah, that video, 5 Things Doctor Who Needs to Stop Doing, that stayed as my top viewed video for a long time. And I actually considered doing that as my reaction. I opted for this one, but maybe if this goes well, we'll do that one at another time.
And I've kind of felt like I am overdue to sort of look at the other side of that. That video, obviously.
Hold on. Let's go over the look a little bit here. So we've got as close to masculine frames as I was doing at that particular point. We've got the flat cap. We've got, oh, that's a House Tyrell necklace. We've got the scarf, of course, which I still use. That's hanging up over there. Actually, the flat cap's over there too. I just don't use it very much anymore. As far as the setup, pretty much all this stuff is still in the background. Well, not all of it, not the gaming consoles, and not Hedwig anymore, for reasons I shouldn't have to explain. But most of this is still in the background of my setup, just along with a heck of a lot more stuff.
As you can tell from the title, talked about things that Doctor Who has been doing that I wanted it to stop. This one, you might think the flip of that is me saying things they should definitely do, except I don't have as firm a thought about what I think the show should do. I mean, there are characters I'd like to see come back. I've done, some stuff revolving around that, and there'll be some more like that. But this time,
that's actually much still the way. So, like, at this point, I have a tendency You know, that I lump this all I lump all this sort of stuff together. I don't do a lot of dictation of what something should do in the future, and I don't do a lot of theory crafting. I don't do a lot of lore stuff. I don't do a lot of making guesses and predictions about what's going to come in the future. Partially because it's just not how my brain works. I'd rather just see what somebody actually makes and then respond to that. Every now and then, like, I'll have expectations built up, like, oh, I hope they do this. But I tend to not take it from the angle of, well, they should do this. At least not before I see it. Sometimes after I see something, I'll go, boy, they should have done this. But I try not to do that in advance. And it's easy to try because, like I said, my brain doesn't really work that way. That was the case then, it's the case now. Some things never change despite all that has visibly changed.
I want to talk about 4 things I don't ever want the show to do. Why 4 and not 5? Because I couldn't think of a 5th that I actually cared all that much about, and I don't like to pad my lists. So
hey,
we're going to talk about 4, and we're going to start with a spinoff on Gallifrey.
Okay, I forgot. I actually legitimately forgot this was a thing that people were asking for at one point. I don't think it really is anymore. Maybe partially because Gallifrey has been destroyed, but I think also like people are still calling for spinoffs. Absolutely. But these days, like they're like, bring Torchwood back, or give us a spinoff on Unit, and either expectations that is what they'll get, or saying that's what they want. I don't remember the last time I heard somebody pitch a Gallifrey spinoff, but that was a thing I'd hear back then, intermittently. Wow, I forgot about that.
I have talked before about how I generally don't like things set on Gallifrey in the first place because either due to the limitations of the budget and what they can realize, or to the limitations of the imagination of the writers, it always ends up demystifying the place.
I generally still agree with this. This has continued to be an issue for me. Like, I don't think I'm as hung up on it as I used to be, just insofar as like I accept this is a thing that happens every now and then and I can't change it. But like I don't like it. I think honestly the strongest the Time Lords have ever been as a presence was their very first appearance at the end of War Games, because we knew almost nothing about them. It was like, holy crap. But the more we learn about them, they're less interesting to me. And I'm not going to say there's no good material that's come out of that. There is a value in taking a society that's kind of been elevated to a point of mysticism and taking them down a few pegs and pointing out, no, actually they're kind of petty and bureaucratic and they're not all that. I'm not going to say there's no value in that. I would just kind of rather know less. And when it gets, the more granular it gets, the more those kinds of details bug me. Like, it's like stuff in Hellbent, like, why is there a barn? Why are there these Gallifreyans dressed like it's Little House on the Prairie? What are we doing? Or the Deadly Assassin, the news reporting really bugged me. It's just a guy talking to a camera. Like, you couldn't come up with a weirder, more alien way for them to distribute information. It's just the same way we do it. It just shows a lack of imagination, and that lack of imagination makes them seem more pedestrian, and to me, that makes them less interesting.
Ends up making it seem really mundane. We go to Gallifrey on things in episodes like The Deadly Assassin, and look at that, they have public television and news announcers. That's weird, and like it's just so mundane. It's so terrestrial. It's so of our world. I want a sense of otherness, of alienness, of being I'm not necessarily better, but like beyond the sorts of things that you and I do here on Earth.
So yeah, pretty much the same. You know what's one of the weird things about watching myself, my older stuff? This is unscripted. Like, even beyond just me knowing that and kind of remembering how I was working at this point in time, like, I could tell it was unscripted. And I think I've gotten better at talking unscripted. I don't think this is bad, but there are moments and pauses to gather thoughts that are way longer than I would leave in now. These days, first of all, it happens less often, or at least I think it does. But when it does, I'm gonna do something to cover that and clip that moment where, at least me, I feel like I see the buffering symbol in my eyes for a hot second. I'm like, processing. There's the thought, and it's weird to watch that in action. Because I'm not gonna say it never happens. Damn it. We'll see whether I got that. I'm not going to say that it never happens anymore, but it feels like something that happened a lot more back then, or at least watching it. I'm more self-conscious of it.
And we almost never get that. Or, like Hellbent, they've got barns.
Same examples.
Like made of wood, and a chunk of their population dresses like his little house on the prairie. What? So
clearly I held on to those specific examples and thoughts. Some stuff gets ingrained.
There's my initial gut reaction to, look, almost never when we get more information about Gallifrey, does it do anything other than make you go, oh, well, that's really very ordinary. I mean, Gallifrey and the Time Lords generally are at their best the less we know about them. When they showed up again in The End of Time, we got a sense of the threat, but they still felt otherworldly. They felt big. It was actually fairly reminiscent of their first official appearance as a society in the War Games, the Second Doctor's era, where we knew almost nothing about them, and it made them so intimidating. But I don't think, between not having a heck of a lot of faith that they're going to be able to consistently give us something that isn't just going to continue to demystify them.
Some of these sentences, that's the stumbling I'm talking about, where I feel like I've gotten better at talking off the cuff and talking unscripted. Again, I think for somebody who was going unscripted at this point in time, I wasn't bad, like on the scale of folks who tend to do this, but I think I'm a lot better now.
And also looking at things like Krypton, I don't think there's anything good to be mined out of this, because again, like I said, Gallifrey works best the less we know about it. And then I'm gonna double down on this and say it would be even worse if it was like a prequel dealing with the Doctor like super young in his first regeneration, like before he was even old enough to look like William Hartnell.
I'm not sure if this is actually part of the official list, this thought. I'm going to agree with that as well. Like this is one of the, so to take a hot second, because this was shot before The Timeless Child existed. So here's the thing. Overall, I really love Jo Martin as a presence. I think she is fantastic. I had the joy to meet her last time I went to Gallifrey 1, which I'm going to do again next month. So if you're at Gallifrey 1, say hi. But for the most part, it really still bothers me, the idea of showing us the Doctor prior to when the show started, because he wouldn't have really been the Doctor. And knowing what he went through or what things led him to become this kind of person is, again, just going to make it seem more ordinary. So pretty much the same thought on that, although I have slightly more solidified thoughts on it, because something like that has at least kind of indicated that a prequel about the Doctor before the start of the show would now involve all these secret and previously unknown regenerations, yet for some reason the TARDIS still looks like a phone box. Although I suppose it is theoretically possible that Jo Martin could still fit the season 2B theory. If you're not familiar with that, okay. So it resulted from the episode The Two Doctors, where the Time Lords basically show up and get the Second Doctor and Jamie to take care of something, but the Second Doctor was fleeing them. He wasn't working for them. So there is a fan theory that I don't think has ever been confirmed in official media, that there was a period, basically a secret season, 6B. I said 2B, 6B. That there was a secret like string of stories where that Doctor worked for the Time Lords, and then was put back and his memory wiped. Now, having that be Joe Martin would be weird because they'd have to like roll back the regeneration and turn her back into Patrick Troughton. But like they still could feasibly theoretically work that in. But if she is in fact meant to be pre-Hartnell, there's just a whole mess from that.
Like that would be awful.
Yeah.
Like no. Never, ever do that. I mean, never do like a Gallifrey spinoff in the first place. Really double never, ever do that.
Double never?
Because it runs into the classic prequel problem. You can't actually develop the character very much, if at all. And even if you do develop it, it's going to be in a very rigid way because he cannot end up more developed than how he was when we started following him in the actual Doctor Who show. Which means you either have to have him have no development or have it be really slow, or you've got to have him start out so far away from what we recognize him as that he can eventually get there over the long haul. And it's going to be painful. It's not going to work. And again, I don't think demystifying the Doctor to that degree is a good idea either. So number 3.
Okay, so that was not officially part of the countdown.
And I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me on this. But hear me out. Never make the Doctor ginger.
I think this one was my petty throwaway one.
I'm serious. I'm not joking. At this point, it has become such a running thing of the Doctor wanting to be ginger, not becoming ginger, that if they ever do it, I think it needs to be the very last incarnation of the show, if not like the...
See, I say that I'm not joking. I think I kind of was... To my memory of this, and this was a while back, this one was kind of a joke, but I treated it as serious, which I think I recognized even as I said this, that this didn't matter, but I talked about it like it did. I'm not going to say that this was not a genuinely held opinion at the time. I think it was, but to see this presented so seriously instead of acknowledging it for the silly throwaway notion it was is very weird. It feels incredibly performative, and actually it's a little... I hope this section's short. This is going to be hard for me to watch. Just sort of getting the sense of you don't care as much as you're acting like you care. And I like to think I generally definitely don't do that now. And I'd like to think I didn't do that a lot back then. So on the occasions that I run into it, it's weird.
Very last episode, like the show's ending and we have the Doctor regenerate into a form that it's presumed goes off and continues to have adventures past the running of the TV show. Like, have that one be ginger, fine. Because at this point, I treat the Doctor becoming ginger like the will they, won't they relationships in most other TV shows. At what point do those shows go downhill? When you answer the question of will they, won't they? Because first of all, the answer is always yes, they will. But when you eventually get them together, the entire dynamic changes and you lose a big part of the, oh, well, okay, they did. Why am I still here?
I mean, I don't disagree with that assessment of will they, won't they. It often, some things can make that jump to, oh, well, they are and they're together now, and to shift the dynamic and have it work. And actually in some shows, because it's mostly a show thing, because in the course of a movie, yeah, of course they're going to get together. And you can't string it along past the run of the one movie. But when it comes to shows, there are a handful that I think have shifted that dynamic in a way that actually refreshed the show. But again, that's a weird comparison to make when you're just talking about hair color. This is weird.
And not that I'm saying the Doctor trying to become ginger is that fundamental to the makeup of the show. I'm not trying to oversell that, but it's good. It's of that same nature. I think that the continued frustration that he has at not being ginger is going to be more entertaining than the very brief pop you'll get by finally doing it.
When was the last time they even brought up the ginger thing? It's been a couple regenerations now. It did not turn into the running gag I think I presumed it was going to be. We've got Mavity now.
I'll stick an asterisk on this and say if they ever do make the Doctor ginger, I really want the reaction to be that the Doctor looks in a mirror and goes, I'm ginger. I don't like it. And then never bring it up again.
Okay, that I still agree with. I actually legitimately still think that would be very funny.
So, but I'd really rather they just didn't do it. Number 2, make the Doctor earthbound.
So, we'll see where I go with this at the time. I can tell you now, I kind of still hold this opinion. I don't think that's something we're actually in danger of, but I wonder if I use this as a springboard to just sort of vent my frustration with how many stories were being set on Earth at the around the time that I made this. Because I know that frustrated me. That was one of the frustrations with especially Clara. While like I'm actually a little bit more of a defender of Danny Pink and that relationship, I will admit to one of the issues that it does is it means the Doctor has to keep coming back to pick up Clara, which means he has to keep coming back to Earth, which means we have more stories set on Earth. And those get a little repetitive for me, just kind of on principle. Like, it's the Earth being invaded again? Come on. So I'm curious to see if I present this here as just a reason to go off on that and like by taking it to the extreme of like, oh, if the Doctor was always stuck on Earth, boy, it'd be really boring because it's already not great. I don't know. We'll see where I go with this. I have not rewatched. I don't remember the last time I rewatched this.
Now, I know there is precedent for this. Most of the Third Doctor's era was very terrestrially locked. He almost never went to other planets. And so I understand there's precedent for this. But I mean, there was also what they were doing with the show at that point.
It was also
sense.
budget control.
Basically, they wanted to make the Doctor
to a certain
more
degree
like James Bond.
You know, they shoot more locations. They don't have to build as many big elaborate sets. They still do some, but you know, they could just film something in a field.
That's why he did the Venusian Aikido. That's why the Master was like a Bond villain. That's why the Doctor had a car and you know the gadgets like the Who-mobile. Like that is why all that stuff was there to give it more of a James Bond flavor. But it then moved off from it. And at this point, especially for how long the show's been around, what a big part of what I love about Doctor Who is the breadth of possibilities, is the fact that he can go, or she, I have to get used to that now, that the fact, or I'll just say the Doctor as often as I can and avoid the gender terms, that the Doctor can go anywhere and any when. I love that breadth of possibilities. And I've seen more than a few people float the idea of maybe with Jodie Whittaker's first season, because it looked like possibly the TARDIS kicked her out, that maybe her whole first series is going to be like trying to reclaim the TARDIS and she'll be stuck on Earth. And oh my God, I hope not.
They never really did address the TARDIS literally tipping over and dropping her. That's just a thing that happened. That never came back. That kind of was an early indicator. Chibnall was fond of doing stuff that felt like it was meaningful and then just moving on and not doing anything with it. Very weird time in Doctor Who. So that's the timeline for when this was. I didn't check when I made this. So it was after Whittaker's casting, but before Series 11 had started. Okay.
I hope not. I don't want the show to be that limited for that length of a period of time. And that's not even me saying that it's impossible to get good stories out of that. But I would also argue that anything that you get out of doing a long-form terrestrial Brown story, i.e. the more character sort of progression and dynamic growth or whatever, like between the Doctor and the companions or the Doctor and other supporting cast, you can still get that, and having them move to different locations and times and planets and stuff, and you can still write that same stuff in. Being Earthbound, it makes you have to do that because you can't go off in space for stuff, but that's not making it Earthbound and restricting it is not the only way to be able to do that kind of stuff. You can still do that without making the show Earthbound. I don't like those kinds of excessive restrictions being put on the show because this show appeals to my inner 9-year-old.
So this definitely isn't something that I would say now, because I don't think it's. I think the reason this was probably on my mind was because of the way that the regeneration happened. People were floating that idea at the time that it would take a while for the Doctor to get the TARDIS back, and so I think this was there was a very limited window where this was a concern. Because, by the end of the first episode of Series 11, they're literally floating in space. And by the end of the second episode, they've got the TARDIS back. So this was a fear that had a very limited window to exist in. But, yeah. I guess it was on my mind at the time. I do feel like, again, in terms of the presentation, I'm leaning into presenting this as frustration more than I would. Now, that's not to say I don't get frustrated, but again, this feels slightly performative, slightly overblown for something that I'm worried might happen. I generally, if I get annoyed at this point to anything along the lines of how I sounded talking about that, it's about things that have happened, not things that might happen. I try not to expend my frustration energy on things that have not even happened.
The part of me that wants to just make believe anything, and the fewer possibilities they are, sort of the less interested I am. So I know this is an idea some people want, and I've seen the idea floated. I really don't want the show to do this one, though.
I'm not sure how many people actually wanted it to happen, or versus people just speculating that it might, given the dumping of Jodie out of the TARDIS. I'm pretty sure I know what this.
And finally, number one.
Pretty sure I remember what this was.
Like, some of these, I will grant there's vaguely possible there was ever so slight sliver of a way that it can be made to work. This one, no. I'm drawing a hard line on this. No.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
The Doctor Who TV show should never, ever have the Doctor regenerate into an actor that has already played the part.
Oh boy! This is the big one. Because, yeah, they did it. And this was not the only time I went on record saying it was a bad idea. I went on record later when people were floating it towards the end of Whittaker's run. I said, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. And then they did it. And I was real nervous. I'll talk about how it panned out once they actually did that in a minute. Let's let him continue and see how he's going to formulate this thought. Apologies if it's overly anger in tone.
Now, a couple things I have to point out about this. One, I do know that canon-wise in the show, they have opened up that possibility due to Tom Baker's appearance in The Day of the Doctor, which is not something I was against. I still like that. But what I liked about that is because obviously they're not going to cast Tom Baker again in this part, but what I liked about it is, to me, that just implied the endlessness of this show, because we will actually never see the character ever regenerate into this actor again, because like I said, he's never going to play the part again, which means we're never going to reach the end, which means Doctor Who effectively goes on forever. Even if the show ends again, we will never truly reach an end point for this character. That's why I was in favor of that scene, aside from the fact that Tom Baker was just wonderful and delightful.
So I know it came up a lot in the comments on my review of The Giggle, where people said that they think part of the thing with the bi-generation means that the Tennant, the second Tennant Doctor, 14th Doctor, is going to eventually become the curator. Suppose possibly. The reason I'm disinclined to believe that is that to me at least, Ncuti Gatwa's lines about how therapy was being done out of order, and he seemed to be very light and unburdened, with the implication being 14 is going to work through his stuff, and then 15 gets the benefit of that, even though they're technically existing concurrently. To me, that implies that 14 is either just going to die, or when he regenerates, it's somehow going to involve a remerging with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor. It didn't suggest to me that he is going to he's going to have his own regeneration line parallel. I'm not going to say it's impossible to do that, but that was not my read on how it worked at all.
But by implying that Tom Baker was a later regeneration of the Doctor, it opens up the possibility that Matt Smith could come back, David Tennant could come back, any of the living Doctors, feasibly. But I mean, realistically, those would be the two that people would be clamoring for, at least at this point.
People were clamoring for David Tennant, especially.
And I think that more than anything else, more than any of the other things I've named, more than almost anything that I can think of, would be the death knell of this show. Because that would be a point at which the
very doom and gloom
show would cease evolving. The show would stop trying to be anything other than fan service. Because the instant the show does, and this show already can get very tied up in its own history and continuity and minutia. Sometimes decently, sometimes to its detriment. But doing something like that, having Matt Smith or David Tennant or Christopher Eccleston or any previous actors play the part, be the Doctor again.
Well, Eccleston, he's not coming back. We got Big Finish. We'll be happy with that.
Not like, here are some extra adventures you didn't know about, but like at the end of Jodie Whittaker's one, she regenerates into Matt Smith. That might be the thing that would make me stop watching Doctor Who. Because at that point, remember I said about breadth of possibilities, endless possibilities? At that point...
So it's interesting because it's odd to hear an older version of a previous regeneration of myself even talk about like, oh, if they did this, I'd stop watching, because that's just not my perspective at this point. My perspective at this point is, oh boy, they did something that I think is a terrible idea. Boy, I hope they can pull this off and do something with it that I couldn't figure out what it could be that would be worth it. That's what I hope. At like preemptively dropping Doctor Who or any show because of like a turn where at this point I'm generally like, well, let's see where they go with this, but I will be nervous. So if I ever drop Doctor Who, it's got to be because of something it does, not something, when I say something it does, like over time. I have a hard time believing there could be a single thing, like it does this one thing and I'm out. More a case of like, okay, well, it's done this and this and this and this, and I'm just tired. That maybe, but this kind of declarative statement, that's weird for me to hear.
That feels like a bigger restriction on possibilities than anything else. And what I mean by that is the show is no longer looking forward. It is only looking back. It will be only looking into its own history. It'll only be gazing into its own navel. It is a regressive move. It would be a deliberate attempt to try and be something that it was before instead of figuring out what it can now be.
So I don't disagree with this general assessment of the fear. How that played out in practice, because, spoiler, I actually did end up liking the specials. Star Beast was good and fun. Wild Blue Yonder was great. And I actually really liked the giggle, including the bi-generation, which I did have to sit on that to be sure what I thought about it. But ultimately I came around on. The thing is, the reason it worked for me was twofold. And these are some things that I obviously was not taking into consideration at the time. The first, limited run, 3 episodes. It's not indefinitely, and being positioned as the 60th anniversary stuff. So this is being positioned as this is a special event, not this is the new normal. So that helped. That was the first thing. And then having actually seen them, they did things that both benefited from the fact that this specific incarnation of the Doctor had a pre-existing dynamic with Donna, and especially in Wild Blue Yonder, really banking on that connection to get some great stuff, great character stuff, very tense scenes. So there was that. But in addition to that, also sort of giving emotional closure to a Doctor who didn't get it. The 10th Doctor, I'm not a huge fan of his regeneration. And like, I understand it as characterization. I understand the hissy fit and the I don't want to go, but I still don't really like it. And for someone like me, it's actually kind of nice, the idea that he gets to come back and have a proper resolution, just existing a life that he could not exist, that he could not have if he didn't know there was another incarnation of him out there doing all the stuff that he would feel obligated to do. So they actually found a really beautiful story that you couldn't tell without bringing back another Doctor. And again, the limited run helped a lot. Like a lot.
And Doctor Who has always been a show that has evolved through the casting of the Doctor, through the changes in aesthetics, through the changes in the creative team and shifts in priorities in the writing. The show has always been evolving, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And sometimes they do bring back older elements, and that's fine. But when you literally start putting the old face back on the character again, that's when there's nowhere forward to go anymore.
So again, it was handled in a way that I could not have predicted, which was, yes, here's the old face to tell a story, especially with Wild Blue Yonder and The Giggle. Less so with the Star Beast, but definitely those latter two, to tell stories that would not work as well if it wasn't somebody that we already knew. So now that having been said, the general fear of regressing back to an earlier point, that is a fear that I still have. I expressed that in a video over on the break room, with the fact that it's very clear Russell T Davies is just slipping back into his mystery box format of storytelling on the show. And that bums me out because I'm very tired of it. And I was hoping he would bring new ideas to the table, and new ways of going through a series. And we'll see. He surprised me in the best way with the 14th Doctor, so we will see. But this general notion of like, I will start losing enthusiasm when the show feels like it is trying to recapture glory as opposed to chart a new path. Yeah, that's still the case. That philosophical notion has not changed.
Now you're just swimming in nostalgia. And that might break me if this show ever did.
It didn't. Yay!
And that is why I think that is the number one thing this show should never, ever do. So that's my list. 4 things that Doctor Who should not ever do. What do you think are some things they should never do? And please have them be things they haven't already done. Don't just be snarky and go, oh, cast a woman, but they did it. Like, look, guys, it happened, okay?
That was legit frustration right there. It always would bother me, like when people would derail the comments with that kind of nonsense, even back then. So yeah, I'm not surprised that I went like, just don't, okay? Can we not?
Tell me something the show has not actually done yet that you think it should never do. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. All the stuff to do: like, subscribe, support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter, listen to my podcast, buy a t-shirt. Links for all that stuff is down in the description. And until next time, this council is adjourned.
So I wasn't yet doing the outro that I now have, not the full version of it, because I did have that phrase that you'll hear when I sign out: you're beautiful, you're valid, you are loved. But I was using it initially for the Vera Wild channel. And then I started integrating it to the videos that were specifically LGBTQIA plus centric. And now it's just standard because, yeah, it's a sentiment I really like to end on. How was I doing the credits back then? Oh, I remember that template. Yep, my thumbnail guy Joel put that together for me. I still like that. I like the rainbowness of it. That is a short list of Patreon supporters. Wow, I've come a long way. Yeah, that was kind of a mixed bag to watch, because like there are some elements that were performative, and hearing myself kind of stumble to try and pick up my thoughts more often, or again, at least it feels like more often, that was a little uncomfortable. But this was not nearly as painful as when I rewatched my video talking about why the Doctor should never be a woman. Oh, So this was not that degree of pain for sure. This was a little awkward though. But I am happy to be able to report back to him, through the echoes of time. Hey, they did bring back David Tennant, and they actually did good stuff with it, and it didn't derail the show. It's okay. And let the ginger thing go. Like, what the heck even was that? So, yeah, that was, again, way less painful than last time. And depending on how people feel about this, I might do another. I could revisit that 5 things that Doctor Who needs to stop doing video, which, as I said, was for a long time the most viewed video on the channel. So that would be probably the top candidate for me to take a look at again if I do this sort of thing again. But for right now, I think we can leave it there. So, yeah, the usual stuff, the like, share, subscribe. What are your thoughts on my old notions? What are your thoughts on my thoughts on my old notions? This gets recursive real quick. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. But even if you can't help me out with that, like, share, subscribe, links in the description. But what I really want you to remember, and what I should have been saying back then too, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Drum roll for my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lafula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B, Turok, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Gozer the Gozerian, Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Geek Filter, Melinda Walters, Toby Jackson, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernambi Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, T Love, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pau Barabajoggle, and Mira G. Thanks so much.